Hey guys, my name is Victoria, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm filming my top 10 books of 2021. So excited, and we're going to get right into it before this intro gets too long. Before we start with the list, I do want to mention some that I really enjoyed this year that did not make the top 10. So it's time for honorable mentions. I find this really funny. First one, The House Without Windows by Barbara Newhall Follett. Loved it. Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Surprisingly enjoyed it a lot. I talked a lot about Malibu Rising and it's in my honorable mentions. Loved this book by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. Laughed so much. Super lovely, great romance. Enjoyed it thoroughly. On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous was a literal little masterpiece. I loved it. The writing was insanely good. And the last one I want to mention is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. A great classic. Though I do want to say, and I explained this in one of my videos, that this book is a very false and very bad representation of dissociative identity disorder. I just want to say that. But I did enjoy the book and I think it was a thrilling classic. And a lot of classics tend to be a bit boring. But this one, for me at least, wasn't. Okay, let's start the list. I had to take a break because dinner was ready, so let's really start with the video now. Number 10 is a book I read in February in one of my vlogs, and it's The Canter of a Ghost by Oscar Wilde. I just really love the experience of finally getting to read and understand this book, because if you watch that vlog, you know that one of my former high school English teachers actually gave the entire class a copy of this book, and it was in 8th grade, and I just remember reading the first page and barely understanding anything because it was more advanced English than we were used to, and finally getting to read this book and thoroughly enjoying it and laughing with it and finding it funny and then sad at times when it was sad. It was just so much fun, and it reminded me so much of the time when I wasn't able to understand that level of English. I love this book. Let's talk about what it's actually about. Oscar Wilde writes about a very old ghost haunting a mansion, and said mansion sadly gets sold every few years and people move in, and the task of this ghost, like, he put it on himself to haunt away any disturbance, meaning the people. And in this book, a new family moves into the house, and sadly for this ghost, this family is not easy to work with. Like, they just don't want to leave. And he's like, I'm doing all the things I've always done, like I'm haunting them as I've always done. Why won't they just leave? Turns out that the family's actually not at all afraid of the ghost, and in the end kind of helps him. I don't want to spoil too much, but it's a very lovely read and a great way to start with Wilde's writing, and I'm really happy that I finally got to read it and I finally got to understand and enjoy it. Number 9 on this list is Loveless by Alice Oseman. I read this in March. This book is about Georgia, a girl who just graduated high school and she's never been in love, never had a first kiss, never had any romantic relationship or experience, and that is like her number one goal, going to university. Soon she finds out that she's actually pretty different compared to other people, and then learns of terms like asexuality and being aromantic. And it's so lovely to read because, like I was in that sense, a new world sort of opened up, a world of self-acceptance and finally understanding what is going on in your head, because this sexuality, or in general this orientation, is not very well represented in the media, just as all the other sexualities except for heterosexuality, obviously. But I think everyone is kind of familiar with gay and lesbian and bisexual, and those are terms that finally coming into conversation. Well, I have so little representation today, it's just sad. But anyway, when I told people on my 18th birthday, I think, that I identify as aromantic and asexual, they were like, what is that? And this book is such a great book for that, because not only are people that are like the protagonist able to relate to a character and to relate to a story, but it educates people. It's such a great book that is very realistic when it comes to this realization, because when I was growing up, I someday knew about people being gay and people being bisexual and stuff, but I never knew about like being aromantic or asexual. And then my sister kind of like told me about those terms, and like it just clicked, it just fit. And that was so amazing. Reading about Georgia, who goes through that process, it was just so relatable, and it was so nice to finally have something to read about, something that happened to you. And it was enjoyable in general because it does talk a lot about sexualities, but it's also a lot about friendship and coming into your own in a way, and going to university, which is like a huge step, and I can't wait to reread it. I really enjoyed it, and such a nice thing to finally read something and feel like you are being heard and you're being represented, and that was great. And that's why it's my number 9. Number 8 is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. A scandalous story about Evelyn Hugo talking about her life, speaking to a journalist who thinks she's there to write an article, but when she meets Evelyn Hugo, who is like this big Hollywood icon, the journalist Monique is told that she's supposed to write not just an article, but Evelyn Hugo's biography. So you get to have all of the information of Evelyn's life in this book. You get to find out all the husbands that she had. You get to find out why she married those. And next to this dramatic and scandalous and very gripping, very gripping plot, you get great writing. I love the writing. It was, I couldn't stop reading this book, and you also get a beautiful love story. I highly recommend this book. We have to have one particular poetry collection in this video, and again, if you watch my videos, it's to no surprise to you that it's I Would Leave Me If I Could by Halsey as my number 7. If you didn't know, Ashley is one of my favorite artists, if not my favorite. They inspire me a lot, and when they published this book last year in November, I think, I had to get it. Whenever I listened to her music, I really closely listened to their words, because I believe that nowadays when I listen to music, it's so sad how little creativity sometimes is in lyrics. And whenever I listened to her writing and songs, I knew she has to write a poetry collection, they have to release it, and then I have to get it. And since then I listened to it and read it almost like every day. I really do enjoy her writing. It's very graphic. She talks a lot about her childhood, her relationship with her parents, abuse that they experienced, sex, sexuality in general, and also just being a writer. And I really enjoy their collection. So yeah, this is I Would Leave Me If I Could for Halsey. Number 6 is a book I recently just finished, and it's Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World, the second part of the Ari and Dante story. This book came out this year, almost 10 years, I think it's 9 years after the first one was released, and I read the first one in January and I loved it, and I reread it in November in order to have all the information fresh in my head to read the second one, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It made me think a lot about my life in a way and experiences that I made, and it confronted me with themes and things that I don't think a lot about, which is weird. I think a lot, but somehow when I was reading this book, I thought, why don't I think about this more? You get the entire story told by Ari. Ari is a very introverted guy who is not afraid to beat up some people if he thinks it's justified. In the first book, you get to know the characters while they get to know each other. So Ari and Dante become friends, maybe even more than that. Yeah, it's a love story. So in the first book, and then their story continues in the second one. And it was just really beautiful and sad and amazing. Multiple beautiful sayings and quotes, and I really enjoyed this book. And seeing them getting older, Ari becoming more confident in himself, in his sexuality with Dante, and I love the relationship, and I laughed a lot while reading this book. I also cried a lot while reading this book. This book was just really special because of the huge development, I think, that Ari made. And I'm so happy about that. Number 5 is something that I'm really happy about because it's a book that was not recommended by anyone. I haven't seen it anywhere, and I saw it on BookBeat and I just clicked on it because it looked interesting, and now it became one of my favorite books of this year. I'm talking about The Lighthouse Witches by C.J. Cook as my number 5. Whee! This book is about a family of one mother and her 3 daughters moving to Longhaven, which is an island in Scotland. Liv, the mother, is commissioned to paint a mural in the lighthouse that is nearby the house that they live in. And soon they find out that this lighthouse is owned by a very particular man who's not well liked in the area. The lighthouse in general just gives you the creeps. And on top of that, you have a family with a daughter in puberty and 2 little daughters, and Liv kind of has to manage all this, and after a while the family gets told more about this place, and there used to be witch trials, and get told about the history of the lighthouse and of Lawnhaven in general. And then terrible things happen and the family is separated. Only Luna gets out of there, and she's looking for a family for 20 years. We jump between 1998, I think, and 2021. 2021 is told by Luna's perspective, 1998 is told by Liv's perspective, and I loved the time jumps. I absolutely loved it. You really get into the other character's head and they think differently. The writing is beautiful. I listened to this, and after like 20 minutes I ordered it because I wanted to read it. I wanted to hold it in my hands and actually read the book because I thought that the writing style was really, really nice. The whole mystery around the place and around what happened in that fateful night, as we always call it, I could not explain until it was explained in the book. I could not foresee it at all, and I could not expect the explanation for what happened. And I really enjoyed the explanation. It was over so fast, and I just wish that it took a bit more time. I think that's just the thing about a good book, that you like ending. It was a huge and happy find for me, and that's why it's my number 5. Number 4, one place before we get to the top 3. Not surprising at all that I have this in my top 10. The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. I loved this book. I really did. The entire time I was reading this book, I felt so comfortable, so cozy. I loved every character, especially the kids, but let me tell you what it's about. The House in the Cerulean Sea is about Linus Baker. In the universe that he lives in, all kids with like magical powers, like the X-Men, like mutants, they're not called mutants though, are completely normal. So normal that they get put into orphanages that are like exclusive to them. There's a whole department of people regulating these orphanages and looking after them and looking into them. It's very strange. On the one hand, this universe is like open about these kids, that they just exist, but on the other hand, you put them in orphanages and have them looked after and looked over all of the time. Anyway, Linus Baker works in this department, and he does not really have that much of a colorful life. It's pretty boring, every day is the same, and he wished he could get out of it, but he doesn't know how. One day he is called for a special assignment into like a department in his department where he is never allowed in, and he's really freaked out. He's like, okay, what the hell is going on? He is supposed to look into one of the most dangerous orphanages there are. Like, the kids are the most dangerous and most strange creatures on Earth, and this is why the orphanage has to be regulated very, very thoroughly. And when Linus finds out that he's supposed to do that, he is very scared and very weirded out. He's like, why me? Why the hell me? I'm not special at all. Fast forward, he comes into the orphanage, which is, by the way, located in the Cerulean Sea. Soon enough, he finds out that you should not always trust what the department of whatever says about this place. It turns out it's the exact opposite. That's all I want to say. I could talk hours about this book, but the way that I did this sound, and this this is embarrassing. This is what I always do when I find something really cute. It's just like, oh. I did this multiple times. Like, I can't even count how many times I did this during this book. I love the characters so much. They're such a happy little family, and I wish they really existed so I could pay them a visit and say, hi, I really like you. Yeah, weird. I'm actually having tears in my eyes. I love this book. I really did. It's such a comfort read, and I can't wait to read it again, but it's such a summer book for me, so I will read it again next summer, and probably the summer after that, and the summer after that. I loved it. If you want a feel-good book that also, by the way, tackles very hard and crucial topics in our society, read this book. We're down to the top 3, so let's get started. Number 3, also to no surprise if you watched any of my videos. Number 3 is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Obviously it had to be here. A retelling of the Iliad, or more specifically from Patroclus's. The way that everyone says his name so differently is enraging me. Perspective, his experience in the Trojan War, and also one day meeting Achilles and becoming his best friend, and then more than friends. I'm a huge Greek mythology nerd. I loved this book. I really did. I cried so much in the end. I knew what was going to happen. You know, I just knew. But I was so sad. It was so horrible. I thought it couldn't get worse. And then a character I absolutely despise shows up and almost ruins the entire book for me. Not really, but it's like, I was so annoyed. But yeah, the ending was very sad for me. I cried my eyes out, but it was a great read. And I will definitely read it again. These two just have a very special place in my heart. And no, this is not accurate. Obviously, Achilles and Patroclus and all that, it's a myth. So many stories are out there, nothing is confirmed. This is just a retelling in the form of a novel, so obviously it's not all accurate. Let's get to number 2. I highly doubt that any one of you, even my friends, know what my number 1 is. Because my number 2, and this might surprise people, is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. And I bet with you guys, especially some of my friends, that you thought that this would be number 1. But it's not. I'll tell you why later. But let's talk about The Picture of Dorian Gray. A phenomenal story about the very handsome, most graceful Dorian Gray, who gets his picture painted by Basil Hallward, and then it's very sad that he has to change and he has to age while his painting remains beautiful and exactly as it is right now. He then wishes that it be the other way around, and that exact scenario takes place. The picture starts to resemble the way that his soul actually looks, and he stays young and beautiful. And that's the premise of the story. Oscar Wilde's writing is my favorite way of writing ever. It's so poetic. Can't wait to get into more of his writing. I love him, and I'm really happy that I read it. I read it twice this year. The first time I read it in April, and the second time I listened to it in October. And I will read it again and again and again for the rest of my life. I love this. And every character in this novel is so interesting. If I ever voluntarily analyze a character, it would be Henry. Henry is such an asshole, and I don't agree with his opinions at all, but his opinions are very fascinating. He's just a very interesting character, and I do like him for that. I really like those kind of characters who are obviously not there to be loved, but are there to cause like trouble and cause conversation, and I love this. I loved it. And I think that's all I'm going to say to the book. I don't want to say too much. My number 1 book of 2021 might be a bit disappointing for some people, I think, because it's part of a huge universe. It's my favorite universe, and it's the last part, the Dark Artifices trilogy, Queen of Air and Darkness by Cassandra Clare. There was not one book that had such a huge impact on me, except for this. The Dark Artifices is a sequel to the Mortal Instruments, books that made me fall in love with books in the first place in 2016. Before that, I hated books. And after years of spending time with these characters, you really get attached to them. I sometimes think about, oh, what are they doing right now? The Dark Artifices, I thought I was not going to like it, but I love it so much. If you want a bit of plot, because it's difficult to sum up 6 books and then 3 and then like sequels and prequels, and it's very complicated. This trilogy is about the Blackthorn family. Can I do all of them? Helen, Mark, Julian, Livy, Ty, Drusilla, and Tavi. 7 siblings who all meet different fates in the Mortal Instruments, in like City of Heavenly Fire, the last book of that, and then in this trilogy. And this is their story, including obviously the main protagonist is Emma Carstairs. Emma is Julian's parabatai. It's a strong bond between Shadowhunters. They are linked through a rune. Yay. And that is a whole story in itself, because they do have lots of issues. But I love every good-sided character. And Queen of Air and Darkness was so horrible. Not in the sense that the book was bad, but it was really hard on my heart. I listened to this book, okay? The first 2 hours of this audiobook, I think I straight up cried the entire time. Because at the end of Lord of Shadows, something very, very, very terrible happens. Oh my god, I'm just remembering it. And I'm starting to cry because it's really sad. I just get attached to characters, okay? The first 2 hours were horrible, and that obviously that theme was like in the entire book because it affected a lot of characters. I don't want to spoil it now. I cried so many times during this book. So much. And I did not only cry about sad things, okay? There were tragic things that I did not even imagine. But there were also such intense moments where characters from other books came in and they all stepped up in like the final battle, and it was just so intense. It was such an intense experience reading this book, and it was I can't say more to that because that sums it up. It was more than just an emotional roller coaster. It was, I can't even find a fitting metaphor for it because it was too much. At some parts I had to stop the book because I was like, I need to take a break. Okay. I remember being on the train to Munich and listening to this book and trying really hard not to cry. That's just the hold that this universe has on me and these characters, and that's why it's my number one. I think this might surprise people because it surprised me too, but in the end it was so obvious because even though there were so many books and so many amazing books that I read this year, this book absolutely stood out with its themes and what happened to the characters. Because again, I know these characters and you get to spend so much time with them, and I think the last book was like 36 hours or something, and finding out what their fate is and finding out what is going to happen and who's going to make it through the last book. It was just a lot. So yeah, I'm sorry, this is such a huge explanation. This was the video. These were my top 10 books of 2021. I need to calm down now. I'm going to end this video now. Please let me know what your, if not top 10, top 5, top 3 books of this year were. I would love to know. Please let me know. I love talking about books. I love finding out what other people read. Wee! Okay, subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet, and don't forget to click the little bell next to the subscription button to never miss an upload, because you get notified every time I upload. All my social media, including my Patreon, is linked down below. Make sure to stick around in the next few days. I think tomorrow I'm uploading my 2021 and my hopes and dreams for 2022, and after that, on New Year's Eve, I might upload a blooper special. I've been editing that video for a month now. Anyway, so yeah, if you're excited for that, definitely stick around. Make sure to subscribe. I hope you all have a wonderful last few days of 2021, and obviously a good start if we don't see each other again into the new year. And I'll hopefully see you in my next video. Bye!